Tom, the U.S. Forest Service, joining us this morning. Good morning, Chris. How are you?
Good morning. Great. Thank you.
I'm glad to have you here. You're here to promote winter woods, which is something that I think a lot of families and groups miss out on because they think snow flies, you close the doors, you start the wood stove, and you don't venture out. AKA cabin fever starts,
Exactly.
setting in. So I'm glad that you're here to give us another option. So let's talk about where you are located and what you do for the Forest Service.
Okay, I work in visitor information for the White Mountain National Forest. Most of my time is spent in the White Mountain Visitor Center, which is right off of Exit 32, right at the junction of Exit 32 and the Kangamungus Highway in Lincoln. And we have a wonderful visitor center there, as a matter of fact. But and this is the number that they will want to get a hold of. We're going to be talking about the Woods in Winter program. It's a program that the Pemmy Ranger District has run for 13 years now. This will be our 13th winter.
Oh, wow. So popular, I imagine.
Oh, yes. This has been going strong for years. Okay. It's a school program. But you would call me there at 603-745-3816, and we can get you in on this.
Okay.
This is for local school groups, Boy Scout groups, Girl Scout groups, any kind of organized group like that. Grades 3 through 6. Those are that's the age bracket that we do the most with.
Right.
Grades 3 through 6. And you join us over at the Lincoln Woods Log Cabin, which is 5 miles out on the Kangamungus Highway. Beautiful little log cabin there. And we put on snowshoes and we head out into the woods and spend some time studying the woods in winter, studying winter ecology on snowshoes. This is at nighttime. This is moonlight stuff.
That is so
Moonlight
cool.
Snowshoe trip for kids.
What is it about winter that really promotes wildlife viewing or knowing about the woods, trees, the whole ecology?
And ecology is just the relationship between elements in the environment, elements in the ecosystem, whether it be the relationship between snow and animals, or the cold and trees, or even between animals as they change during the wintertime. But there's that perception that the woods in the wintertime is cold and dark and dead. Well, it's anything but dead. There's all kinds of stuff going on there. As a matter of fact, I really think the wintertime is the best time for people who really want to view wildlife. Now, when we say wildlife, part of viewing wildlife is what we call animal sign, tracks, viewing or feeding habits, and a lot of other things like that, scat, other things like that. And it's really far more visible in the wintertime on that big white carpet out there than it is in the summertime. Our Forest Service surveys tell us that White Mountain guests, a very high percentage of them, one of their chief goals is to see wildlife.
Sure.
And it's a great thing, and of course many do. Sometimes you see something, sometimes you don't. But in the wintertime, particularly when we're talking about sign, it's right there. It's right there in front of you. It's right on that white carpet.
Sure.
It's a lot easier to see. For instance, let's take animal tracks. Okay, the most perhaps the one people think of most. In the summertime, if you're lucky enough to see tracks along a trail that haven't already been obliterated by hikers, they're going to tend to veer off into the woods somewhere. And if you were to follow them, they're going to be hard to follow, for one thing, heading off into the vegetation. It's going to be a physical challenge, bushwhacking in all that vegetation, and it's going to cause some impact as well. But in the wintertime, a lot of that vegetation, of course, is gone. The tracks are going to be obvious. They're going to be very easy to follow visually. Physically, they're going to be easier to follow. On modern snowshoes, off you go. Now, mind you, you got to be prepared. Got to know what you're doing. Got to be hike safe.
Right.
All right. But you can head off and follow those things a lot easier, and the impact is zilch. If you use any care whatsoever, the impact is going to be a lot less than it would be in the summertime.
Now,
so
you mentioned Hike Safe. Where do they get more information about that? Because that is important. You don't want people just heading out. They,
Absolutely.
Compass, how to use a map and get back safely. You're going to need your water. Don't rely on your cell phones. They don't always work. They run out of batteries, especially in the wintertime. Can they find more information on your website about that?
Oh, yes. Forest Service website, Fish and Game website. Appalachian Mountain Club is very helpful on this. We have a lot of printed material over at White Mountain Visitor Center. We're not talking about long bushwhacks off the trail, but nevertheless, you still got to be prepared, even if it's only a few feet.
You're out there. But how long does the nighttime stroll last in the winter woods?
The whole program goes for about 2 hours.
Okay.
Groups get there a little bit before 6 o'clock. We get on the snowshoes. We head out there. We're back in the cabin. We do a little wrap-up program, and they're done by 8 o'clock. So this is designed for that age group.
And is there a cost associated for that?
No cost whatsoever.
Really?
Zero. This is a way that we can get the public involved, and we can give back to the public a little bit, get them excited about what we do out there in the woods too.
Awesome. Now, over the last 13 years, what would you say is sort of the ultimate crowd pleaser? What has been the animal or the sign that kids are always ooh and ahhing about?
Oh, that's a good question. Excellent question. I had one older group that I took out a little bit further than we normally went on a night that was a little bit colder than we often went out there. But we kept moving, and we went out, and there was actually a small colony of beaver that had moved in on a brook nearby, and we were we didn't actually see beaver, but a lot of new evidence of trees down and activity on that brook that was kind of fun.
Fantastic. Now, have you ever seen a moose, or like the wow factor animals, owls? Have you seen owls or heard owls? Do you do a lot of birding type vocal identification?
I can't think of as much at night, no. A lot of constellation stuff, okay, the night sky, that kind of thing,
nice.
a lot of that kind of thing. I'm a tree person. I get them thinking about, what's a tree doing in the wintertime anyway? Well,
I love the tree sign too, because there's a lot of sign of deer and moose. People might not even know when they're walking by on the trail and a bud's been nipped off that's a sign of a moose or a deer. And how it's been ripped.
We talked about animal tracks. Kind of my favorite spot up there behind the Lincoln Woods Log Cabin where I used to take my groups is a little bit of a clear cut, a little log landing up behind the cabin where we can go around the outside, what they call the intermediate zone there, or the transition zone next to the woods, and see bushes and stuff that have been chopped off. And we can look at a bush and say, oh, look at that one over there. That one's it's not too high off the ground. This is right after snow, about 6 or 8 inches of snow, and that's cut right off, just like cut with a knife at 45 degrees. And I see some track there. Aha! That's snowshoe rabbit, okay? And they're out there on a feast because they're 6 inches higher off the ground, and they're into a new food supply because of the extra snow, and they're chomping with those front teeth and chomping those right back.
So which one's more of a pulling, stripping?
That's the moose, okay? Even just a few feet away from something like the snowshoe hare sign, we'd see either red or sugar maple saplings. 4 or 5 feet high, and those are just chomped right off. They're almost mashed, shredded by those big rear molars of the moose, and they're pretty obvious too. And of course, all this stuff really stands out when there isn't a lot of other green vegetation around that, and the stems being gnawed at, that kind of thing. So there's that kind of sign. There's also some really interesting ecological relationships between animals that you can see out there if you know about them ahead of time. We can talk about other books and things that they can read up on this stuff on. But for instance, there's a very interesting relationship that evolves in the wintertime between rodents and deer.
Really?
Red squirrels love to spend a lot of time in the tops of red spruces, and they get out on the branch tips and chomp away, and a lot of that stuff falls to the ground.
Right, yeah.
Porcupine do the same thing. They love hemlock. Porcupine will go up in a hemlock tree, spend hours, days, even weeks in a given hemlock chewing off the bark. And they wind up chewing off good size hunks of branches which fall to the ground. Those become very, very important food supply for deer. When the browse area in their own deer yard gets really sparse, they go out after that food, and they've actually been known to follow right behind these rodents from tree to tree to pick up that extra food supply. And of course, there again, that's right on the ground. It's right in front of you. If you know about that kind of thing, you've done a little bit of research, you've learned, maybe you've gone on some trips with some other organizations, you can see this stuff, and that drama is spread out.
That's just a little nugget, though, a little taste of what they can get through your program.
That's the kind of thing that they would get through our program.
Great.
And there are other organizations too that, if you can't weasel your adults out there, if you can't weasel your way in with the 3rd to 6th graders on a trip, perhaps, a lot of other organizations do this kind of thing.
Right. Okay.
And take advantage of the woods and winter.
Absolutely. And real quick, before we wrap it up, Chris, real quick, can you just give us a quick sampling of some of the books that might be
on tracking, a lot of tracking books out there, the Peterson series, the Audubon series, that kind of thing. And don't ignore individual authors. Paul Resendez is a wildlife photographer who had to learn tracking really well, just apply his trade. There are a lot of general guides out there. Here's a local one.
Just hold that up for a sec.
Yep, there's a local one. Tin Mountain put this out, Ned Beecher. This is a general wildlife guide for this area. It's broken up into sections, has one whole, it's broken up by season actually, has a whole section on winter in
That's great that it's for the Mount Washington Valley too, because so many of the guidebooks, you have to go through the southern birds or, the northern way northern trees, and
Yeah,
that
this is
really
right
keeps it
here. These are
focused. Great.
trips and things you can do right here, described right in the Mount Washington Valley. And there are a few books, not a lot, but a few books that are actually about nature in the wintertime. This one is out of print. Donald W. Stokes, he put out a lot of other good guides over the years, and it's called A Guide to Nature in Winter.
Well, there you go.
So that's kind of what you're looking for. Okay.